So I don't know what it's like where you live, but up in Alaska, the month of May has just been brutal. It's been cold, it's been raining almost every single day. And so my wife and I just decided, you know what, we're getting out of here for a while, and we were on vacation anyway. And so we flew to Vegas. And so we got to Vegas early this morning, I don't know, about 6, 7 a.m. And so we've been here a better part of the day. It actually was fairly windy and cool when we got here, of all things, so it's kind of shocking, but it's warm now. So sunshine, warm weather, can actually go outside and walk, wear shorts, short sleeve shirts. It's been awesome. So we came down here to thaw out a little bit. But this whole video is about the National. Before we get into that, I do have a question for you. Have any of you ever checked out these lucky boxes? I imagine they have them in other places besides Vegas, but I just so happened to see a couple of these, and I'll show you a couple pictures. I think it was $160 for a mystery sports card slabbed. I guess it's a slabbed graded card or an authenticated auto. And then I think Pokemon was like $99. It's like modern Pokemon. Now for me, that's a hard pass, but for some, I'm sure, that could be something that people would be interested in. Actually, that might have been $80. The vintage Pokemon was sold out. I think that was $99. And then they had a jersey edition. I don't remember what the price is on that. Kind of curious to see if anybody's ever bought anything from those. I saw a couple opened last year when we were in Vegas, when I got married here. And they were decent. I mean, they were $50 to $75 cards. I mean, the people took an L. But they were decent cards at least, so I'm just kind of curious. Anyways, the purpose of this video. So this is my 11th time that I'm going to the National this year, and I've got 10 tips for you. If you've watched my previous National videos, I like to put out a tips video, a month or two before the show, just to give some people some things to think about. And these are things that I always consider when I'm going to the show. So this year it's in Rosemont again. It's a little bit different for us this year because we're not getting hotel rooms. We actually rented a house. Our group is a little bit bigger this year. And so we're actually pretty excited about it, but we're going to be kind of commuting in. I typically got hotels like right across the street from the convention center. Not doing that this year. The advantage of that, of course, is that, you get tired during the day. You can go back, take a dip in the pool. You can go have some lunch, whatever you want to do, and then come back. But so our house is going to be, I want to say it's like 10 minutes from the show, so no biggie. So that's one big adjustment for us. But let's go ahead and get into these tips. My number one tip. So any event of this size where you have over 100,000 people, there's going to be people that have a bad experience. I totally get that. And you're going to see a very small percentage of people talk negatively about the National as far as people that actually go. My first tip is to just ignore the naysayers that speak negatively about the National and aren't there. It is the weirdest thing ever when people feel the need to try to tear apart the National and try to find any little nitpicky thing to complain about about the National, and they're not even there. As if we don't all have better things to do. It's such weird behavior. So my suggestion would be just ignore the naysayers. Now, if somebody's there and they had a bad experience, then that's a little different story. But there's people that want to share opinions on something that they know nothing about. And so that's my first suggestion. Number two, always communicate with the dealers and also communicate with fellow collectors. So if you have a VIP badge, the VIP room last year was almost like a mini card show. I would go up there for lunch and there's people that have cards spread out all over these tables, and it's a big room. So it's almost like a mini card show. People are buying and selling, they're trading in there. And just being able to communicate with fellow collectors out there to try to communicate into some trade deals or maybe some purchases or things you're selling, but also with dealers. I've just found over the years that having those good conversations leads to discounts from dealers. It leads to better transactions from other collectors, and it leads to new friendships too with people. I've met many people over the years from online forums and things like that in groups that are still friends to this day. So definitely worthwhile focusing on those communications with dealers and other collectors. Number 3, if it's rare and fair, I would buy the card. Now, I have a little bit of a tweak to this year. So, having something be rare doesn't necessarily mean that it's an SSP, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a really low pop card. It could be a card that just has a very, very rare subgrade. I'll give you an example. A few years back, right around COVID times, my brother bought a Jerry Rice rookie. It was graded an 8.5, but it has 9.5 centering. I mean, that thing, the centering on that Jerry Rice card is unbelievable. And if you know anything about Jerry Rice's rookie, that's not always the easiest thing to find. So, in my opinion, I remember telling him a few years ago, I'm just like, look, if you don't buy this card, I'm going to, because I thought the price at the time was fair. Now, the price has dropped shortly after we bought it, unfortunately, but they've since gone back up. But I also, because of that rare subgrade, man, they're just hard to find really, really well centered. And of course, you know, if you find something that's numbered to 10, it's a 1 of 1, it's an SSP. If you're really interested in it, there's probably other people that are too. So if it's rare and fair, whether it's a rare subgrade or a rare card in general, or a really scarce card, I tend to buy those types of cards, because if I pass on them, somebody else likely will. So keep that in mind. This has been brought up in the past by other YouTube content makers in the past. I found myself passing on pretty good deals prior to the National, just because it was in really close proximity to the National. Meaning, like, I've passed on deals within, like, let's say 2 weeks of the show or a month of the show, because it's like, well, I want to save my money for the show and I don't really want to spend it. And then later on I regret it, and I'm just like, wow, I really should have bought that card. Like, I don't know why I didn't. My thing is this: try to keep yourself in a position where if you run into an amazing deal or a rare card that you really want, where you can still try to make that happen, even if it's in close proximity to the show. I have been burned by that before. I remember years ago, I went to a card shop in Missouri, and they just bought a big basketball collection, and I bought a card or two. I bought 2 cards from that collection that he had just brought in, but there were a bunch that I passed on. I don't even remember all of the exact cards, but I remember a bunch of them that I passed on because it was so close to the show and I didn't want to dip into my show budget. And by the time I got done with that National, I'd spent all my National budget, of course. But there were a couple cards in there where I was like, man, I should have bought those, even if it meant a smaller National budget. So just something to keep in mind, because that happens. Good deals do present themselves kind of out of the blue sometimes. This is a new one. I've never really talked about this before. So number 5 on my list is, if you love the player, get ahead of the game. I really like Ohtani. I think he is, in my opinion, he's the best baseball player of my lifetime. The fact that he's so good at pitching and hitting. Really love Ohtani. I'll be honest, I don't watch tons of games. But really, really love Ohtani. So a lot of Ohtani's stuff has really shot up in price. I've got some higher end Ohtani. If you go back and look at some of my previous videos, I've got some nice Ohtani stuff. But I'm also buying up a lot of like low end refractors, low end inserts, you know, those types of things, because I think, and this is just my opinion, I view him along the same lines as like a Jordan, you know, that type of class of athlete. And so for me, in my budget, I'm loading up on the low end Ohtanis because I feel like I'm getting ahead of the game. You know, you look at a lot of these cards, the Scoring Kings Jordan, for example. I remember back when that was like $100, $200, $300. Now it's a few thousand. That card wasn't always super expensive. There's countless examples. The In Fuego Michael Jordan. I looked the other day, it's like a $400 insert. I remember passing on that for like $5, $10, $15. So I learned some lessons in the past. And if there's a player that I really love, I'm getting ahead of the game. And it's not just like the low numbered, super expensive stuff. I'm talking the cheap stuff. And so I'm doing that. I'm doing that to a smaller degree with Wemby too. Wemby concerns me a little bit because of the injury risk, but that's a whole other deal. So that's number 5 on my list. 6. I like to take cards to trade with me to the National. I like to focus oftentimes on cards that have had a big upswing, so I can kind of capitalize on that. I don't really tend to look to sell. I look to try to trade typically. Now, I mean, if I have something that's gone way up in value and I can sell it, I will. But typically, it does me a lot of good to bring cards to trade, so that I can trade up into higher end cards. Because there's a lot of dealers at the show, I have found, and a lot of individuals that are looking to trade down. Because the idea is you're giving them more value, and you're giving them more liquid cards. You know, cards in the $20 to $200 range oftentimes are some of the most liquid cards, because that's within the average person's budget, versus the $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 cards. Those move at the National, but the cheaper cards are a lot easier and sell in a much larger volume, of course. So I do that every year. I take cards to trade. My 7th thing on the list, just take the great deal. I mean, if I watch I watch a lot of like YouTube content pertaining to sports cards, and oftentimes I watch how people interact with dealers, and sometimes the dealer is just giving them a great deal. I mean, they're marking things down 10, 15, 20% on guys that are, you know, fairly hot in the market. Like, I'm just like, wow, I'm kind of surprised, right? And people try to get a further discount. Sometimes it's like, just take the great deal. If you run into a dealer that gives you a really good deal, just take the deal and call it a day. But that's just me. Some people they're gonna keep negotiating no matter what. But you miss out on deals that way sometimes. So just take the good deal. All right, going into 8. Speaking of take pictures and include booth numbers. So when you find cards you want at the National, if you're like me, I can't buy everything I want. That's probably all of us, right? Some degree or another. You know, I typically go with like a $2,000 to $3,000 budget, maybe more, plus cards to trade, of course. And you know, you can't buy everything that you want. And so sometimes I have 6, 8, 10 cards on a list where I'm just like, man, I can't decide. They're fairly rare. They're seem to be fairly priced, but I still can't decide. Like, I'm going to buy a few of them, but I can't buy all of them. And so what I do is I take pictures of them. I ask the vendor what booth they're at. I go in to edit the picture, and I write the booth number right on the picture. And sometimes when I go back to those cards, they're gone. Sometimes they're still there. And sometimes that makes the decision for me. Something to consider. You're not going to remember where you saw stuff at. I have a pretty good memory. You're not going to remember. Everything looks very similar in a lot of places in the National just because it's so large. Number 9. This is the show. This is the place to go for rare player cards, not for particular cards. I'll explain. If you have a rare or scarce card, a very specific one, I'll give you 2 examples. Last year, Blue Phoenix, number to 99, Luka rookie. Another example, Blue Crusade, number to 99, Luka rookie. I had both those cards on a list. I did not see a single copy of those at the show. I'm much better off just going online and buying them. I get it. However, I did find this Optic Contenders preview super low pop of Luka. This is the place to go to find rare or scarce cards of a player, but not specific cards necessarily. You will find cards of a player that you didn't even think to put on a list. Where you're just like, oh man, like that. This Optic Contenders preview, what a fantastic card! It's a great card. It's one of my favorite Luka PC cards. I didn't have that on my list. I'd seen it before, so I'm not gonna say I didn't know it existed, but it never crossed my mind until I saw it in a showcase. And I'm like, that I know is a rare card. And I want that card. And so it's the place to go to get rare and scarce cards of a player, but not necessarily specific cards. Keep that in mind. Sometimes you got to be a little bit flexible. If you're inflexible in what you want and you got a very specific list, you're probably going to be disappointed. How do I know? Because it's my 11th show, and oftentimes the times I have had a list, I have gotten very few things from the list. Just a tip. And finally, number 10, the art of the bundle. So many dealers have deals where the more you buy, the better discounts you're going to get. If you can find multiple cards from a dealer that you want, you're more inclined to be able to get a better deal. All dealers are different. I don't go up to them and say, hey, what percentage do you need to be at? I go up to them and make offers. I know a lot of dealers get annoyed when it's like, what percentage do you have to be at? Just make an offer. I typically like to pay 85 to 90% on most things. Obviously, if it's a super hot player, that's not going to happen. Most often, though, if I offer 90% of average comps, the dealer takes it. Again, not always. If it's a super hard to find card, probably not. If it's a super hot player, probably not. But other than that, I'll give you a specific example as we close. I'm a Kevin Durant fan. I know he kind of messed up his career by bouncing around, but he's one of the best scorers of all time, and he came into the league the year I got back into collecting. So I kind of have a soft spot for Kevin Durant. I do PC him. I never really thought much about it, but I go back and look. And I went back and looked at some previous videos that I'd done in prior nationals. I'm just like, what are the trends here? I buy KD just about every show. And so when I make offers on KD cards at 85 to 90% of recent comp averages, they get accepted 90% of the time, let's say, 95% of the time. Rarely do I ever have one declined. I'll get a counter here and there of a little bit higher. There's always a discount because he's not super high in demand. But that's kind of the difference. So, art of the bundle, always a good idea. If you have multiple cards that you can buy from the same seller, you're more likely to get a deal. So, let me know what you're thinking, guys. Do you have any other ideas or tips for fellow collectors? Leave them in the comments. Let us know what other types of ideas that you have. We are going to go back to enjoying the weather. We got access to a pool here. We typically stay downtown. It's kind of more of our vibe. And then anytime we want to go to the strip, we just kind of take an Uber over there and stuff. So we're going to get back to that. But again, leave those comments regarding any tips that you may have, and we'll see you in the next one.